The smoke in the sky. The sun was setting over the red hills of Theta Prime, a colony world far from Earth. The air smelled of dust and metal, the kind that stuck to the back of the throat. Dr. Mason Cole, a human veterinarian assigned to the colony's frontier sector, was driving his old rover back to base when he saw something strange. At first, he thought it was just another local festival. Smoke was rising from behind a rocky ridge, and flashes of orange light danced against the twilight. But as the wind shifted, Mason caught another scent. Burning fur. He frowned. "That's not right," he muttered to himself. Festivals didn't smell like that. Curiosity, or maybe instinct, made him turn the rover toward the smoke. The path was rough, covered in sharp stones. But Mason had been on enough alien worlds to know that curiosity often saved more lives than it risked. As he climbed the hill, the wind carried the sound of laughter, high-pitched, rough, and cruel. When he reached the top, he froze. Down below, a group of Kalarn traders were gathered around a makeshift fire pit. They were big creatures, lizard-like, their scales glinting gold in the firelight. Around the pit, metal cages were stacked, and inside them, small creatures whimpered and cried. Mason squinted. At first, he thought they were some kind of local rodents. But then one of them turned toward the firelight, and he saw their eyes. Big, round, and filled with fear. Puppies, alien puppies. Their skin was soft and pale blue, their ears like little petals, their tails curling when they tried to hide from the heat. There were 6 of them. And the Kalarn were preparing a spit over the flames. Mason's chest tightened. He had worked with alien animals for years, on farms, research stations, even war zones. But this was cruelty for fun. He stepped closer, staying low. The Kalarn leader, a massive creature with burn scars across his jaw, was sharpening a long blade made of bone. He spoke in rough trade tongue. "Tonight we eat like warriors. Fresh catch, soft and tender." The others laughed. One kicked a cage, making the puppies yelp. Mason's blood boiled. He wanted to run down there and stop them, but there were at least 7 Kalarn, all armed and each twice his size. He didn't even have a weapon, just his med kit and a tranq injector used for animal sedation. Still, he couldn't just watch. He whispered to himself, "Okay, Mason, you've done stupid things before. Let's make this another one." He checked his belt. 3 tranquilizer darts, 1 flash flare, and a small blade for cutting bindings. It wasn't much, but it was something. Crawling down the slope, he used the rocks for cover. The fire crackled louder as one of the Kalarn pulled a puppy from the cage. The little creature screamed, thrashing its tiny limbs. That sound broke something inside Mason. He rose from cover and shouted, "Hey! Put it down!" The Kalarn froze. For a moment, nobody moved. The one holding the puppy sneered. "A human? This is not your business." Mason took a step closer. His heart pounded in his chest. "It is now. You harm that creature, and I swear you'll regret it." The group laughed, mocking him. "You think your kind gives orders here? Go back to your hole, soft skin." Mason lifted the injector gun. "I said, put it down." One of them growled and took a step toward him, tail twitching. Mason fired. The dart hissed through the air and hit the Kalarn's neck. The creature staggered, roared, then collapsed, unconscious. Everything went silent for half a second, then chaos exploded. The Kalarn lunged at him, roaring. Mason fired 2 more darts, hitting another in the chest before diving behind a rock. A blade whistled past his ear, embedding in the dirt beside him. The puppy still hung in the leader's grip, whimpering. Mason saw its eyes, terrified and pleading. He knew he had only one chance. He grabbed the flash flare from his belt and threw it straight into the fire pit. The explosion of light and smoke blinded the Kalarn for a second. Mason sprinted forward, grabbed the puppy from the stunned leader's hand, and dove for the cages. "Easy, little one," he whispered. "I've got you." The puppy licked his hand, weakly, trembling. Mason used his blade to cut open the other cages. One by one, the alien puppies stumbled out, disoriented but alive. Then he heard it, the deep, guttural growl behind him. The leader had recovered. His eyes glowed with rage as he raised his blade high. "You dare steal from me, human?" Mason turned, clutching the puppy close. His pulse thundered. "Yeah," he said quietly. "And I'll do it again." The blade came down, fast. Mason blocked with his arm. Pain exploded through him as the weapon sliced across his glove. Sparks flew from his protective plating, but it held, barely. He staggered back, his hand bleeding. The leader swung again. Before the strike could land, a shrill alarm blared in the distance. Colony patrol vehicles approaching. The Kalarn cursed and scattered, vanishing into the shadows. Mason fell to his knees, clutching his injured hand. The puppies huddled around him, shaking. He looked at them and smiled weakly. "You're safe now, little ones. At least for tonight." But as he glanced toward the dark ridge, he knew this wasn't over. The Kalarn would come back, and next time they wouldn't run. The ones that shouldn't exist. Mason drove the rover through the dark, his injured hand throbbing under a bandage. The alien puppies lay curled together in the back seat, wrapped in a silver blanket from his med kit. They were quiet now, exhausted from fear, their little chests rising and falling as they slept. Outside, the twin moons of Theta Prime hung low, painting the sand in pale blue light. Every time Mason looked in the mirror, he half expected the Kalarn raiders to appear behind him. But the desert remained empty, just the wind and the hum of his engine. When he finally reached the colony outpost, the security gate scanned his ID and opened with a hiss. A tired guard leaned out of the booth. "Evening, Doc, you're late?" Mason nodded. "Yeah, had a rescue mission." The guard frowned when he saw the movement in the back seat. "What are those?" "Patients," Mason said quickly. "Very small ones." He drove past before the guard could ask more questions. Inside the outpost's veterinary lab, the air smelled clean, sterile. The soft hum of machines filled the silence. Mason gently lifted each puppy onto the metal table. Their skin shimmered faintly under the lights, tiny bioluminescent dots glowing near their paws. He scanned one of them. The display flashed red. Unknown species. Genetic data not found. That made him stop. Theta Prime was a surveyed colony. Every native species was registered, every animal logged by xenobiologists years ago. But these little creatures didn't match anything in the database. He frowned. "Where did you come from?" One puppy stirred, opening its big golden eyes. It made a soft chirping sound and nudged his injured hand. Mason smiled despite the pain. "Don't worry, little guy. You're safe now." He cleaned their burns, gave them fluids, and patched their wounds. They responded fast, too fast. Within an hour, all six were walking again, sniffing around the lab, tails wagging. That's when the door opened. A tall figure stepped in. Lieutenant Herrick, the colony's alien liaison officer. His skin was metallic gray, his face hidden behind a breathing mask. His cold yellow eyes scanned the room. "Dr. Cole," he said in a calm, echoing voice, "you returned late from your shift, and you brought creatures." Mason straightened. "I rescued them from a Kalarn camp. They were about to be cooked alive." Herrick tilted his head. "Kalarn raiders, disgusting. But you should have reported this to security first." "I didn't have time," Mason replied. "They were in cages, screaming. I had to act." Herrick walked closer, studying the puppies. When one barked softly, he flinched back. "These are not registered species. They do not belong here." "That's what I found," Mason said. "No record in the colony database." Herrick's eyes narrowed. "Then they are a threat." Mason's jaw tightened. "They're babies. Perhaps. But unknown life forms can carry pathogens, parasites, or worse. Protocol demands they be terminated." Mason froze. "Terminated?" "For colony safety," Herrick said. "You know the rules, Doctor. Containment or destruction." The puppies gathered near Mason's boots, trembling. He could feel their fear, somehow deeper than instinct. He shook his head. "I'm not killing them. Not after what they've been through." Herrick's eyes glowed faintly. "You are letting emotion cloud your logic." "Maybe," Mason said. "But sometimes emotion is the only thing that makes us human." There was a long silence. Then Herrick turned sharply toward the door. "I will report this to the administrator. You may keep them under observation until a decision is made." The door hissed shut behind him. Mason exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He sat on the edge of the table, staring at the puppies. They looked up at him, eyes full of trust. He whispered, "We're in trouble, little ones." As the hours passed, Mason examined their biology more closely. Their cells regenerated faster than any species he'd seen. Their blood shimmered faintly under UV light like liquid starlight. And deep inside their DNA, he found something impossible. Human gene markers. He stared at the screen, stunned. No, that can't be right. The data repeated, confirming it. The alien puppies were somehow partly human. That changed everything. Suddenly, the lights in the lab flickered. Mason looked up. Through the observation window, shadows moved outside, figures in armor. The Kalarn hadn't run far, after all. They had tracked him here. He quickly turned off the lights and crouched beside the table. The puppies whimpered softly. Mason whispered, "Shh, quiet now." Through the glass, he saw 3 Kalarn raiders creeping toward the lab door, their weapons glowing faintly in the dark. They weren't here to talk. He reached for his comm. "Security, this is Dr. Mason Cole. We've got intruders, Kalarn, 3 or more, approaching the lab." Static crackled. No response. The signal was jammed. A heavy thud shook the door. The metal frame bent inward under a powerful strike. Mason grabbed his tranq injector and scanned for options. He couldn't fight them all, but maybe he could buy time. He whispered to the puppies, "Hide! Go!" To his shock, the little creatures didn't run randomly. Instead, they moved together, almost in formation, slipping under tables and behind equipment as if they understood him. The door groaned again. Bolts snapped. Mason took cover behind a console, his injured hand gripping the injector tight. His pulse thundered in his ears. When the door burst open, the first Kalarn stormed in, and a blinding flash erupted from the corner. The puppies were glowing, their bodies pulsing with light. Energy rippled through the lab, slamming the attackers backward. The air vibrated like thunder. Mason shielded his eyes as a wave of blue light swept across the room. Then silence. When he looked again, the Kalarn were gone, disintegrated into fine ash. The puppies stood in the center of the room, unharmed. Their eyes glowed faintly, watching him. Mason swallowed hard. "What are you?" One of them chirped softly and limped toward him, pressing its paw against his bleeding hand. The wound began to close, slowly but visibly healing. Mason stared, speechless. Whatever these creatures were, they weren't just animals. They were something far more powerful, and maybe far more dangerous. End of Part 2. Would you like me to continue with Part 3, 800 words, where the colony authorities react to the attack? Mason is accused of harboring a weapon, and he must decide whether to hide the alien puppies or expose the truth about their origin. You said 3ChatGPT said perfect. Here's Part 3, 800 words of your HFY Sci-Fi story. Alien puppies were about to be barbecued, but the human risked losing a hand to save them. HFY. This chapter deepens the mystery and conflict, showing the colony's fear, Mason's moral struggle, and the first signs that the puppies are more than anyone realizes. Written in third person with simple cinematic language and a strong emotional hook for your YouTube audience. The secret they wanted buried. The morning after the attack, the colony outpost was in chaos. Security drones circled above the damaged veterinary lab, scanning the area for radiation or weapons. Soldiers in gray armor blocked every exit. Dr. Mason Cole sat on a metal bench outside the lab, his wrists cuffed, his clothes burned from the night's explosion. His thoughts spun like broken machinery. Inside the lab, the 6 alien puppies were gone. The first people to arrive after the incident were the Colony Security Division, led by Captain Rhea Valen, a strict officer with sharp eyes and no patience for rule breakers. She was human, but her tone was colder than the metal around them. She stopped in front of Mason, arms crossed. "Dr. Cole, do you want to tell me what in the void happened here?" Mason's throat felt dry. "We were attacked. Kalarn raiders. They broke in around midnight." "Funny," Rhea said, glancing at her data pad. "Our sensors show no energy signatures, no heat trails, nothing leaving the perimeter. It's as if your intruders disappeared into thin air." Mason looked away. "That's not wrong." Rhea raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" He hesitated. He wanted to tell her the truth about the light, the glowing, the energy pulse that destroyed the raiders, but he could already see her reaction. If he said it out loud, the puppies would be taken, studied, or worse, so he lied. They must have used a cloaking field. Maybe a plasma grenade misfired. I don't know. Rhea studied him for a long moment, then leaned closer. You were alone in a sealed lab. 6 unidentified life forms went missing. 3 dead aliens, reduced to dust, no visible cause. That's not a coincidence? Mason met her eyes. I didn't hurt anyone. Maybe not, Rhea said softly. But something did, and you were the only witness. She turned to the guards. Take him to holding. I'll inform the administrator. As they led Mason away, he looked back at the shattered lab. The blood on the floor was gone. The smell of ozone lingered. He could still feel the echo of that strange energy, the warmth that had healed his hand. He whispered to himself, Where are you, little ones? The holding cell was small, cold, and silent except for the hum of power lines overhead. Mason sat on the bunk, his mind racing. If the puppies had escaped, where would they go? Could they survive on their own? Hours passed before the door opened again. Lieutenant Herrick entered, his mask hissing softly. His glowing eyes regarded Mason with something between curiosity and disgust. You caused quite the disturbance, Doctor, Herrick said. Security believes you may have brought a bioweapon into the colony. Mason laughed bitterly. They were puppies. Puppies that disintegrated armed raiders? Herrick replied. Do not insult my intelligence. I didn't do it, Mason said. I swear! Herrick tilted his head. Then you will not mind if the security division searches your quarters. Mason stiffened. His quarters were near the northern storage wing, where he had left his spare med kit and emergency food supplies. If the puppies somehow made it there, they'd be found, I mind, he said quietly. They're just frightened animals. Leave them alone, Herrick leaned forward. You don't understand, human. Those animals are not native to this world. They should not exist. Someone created them, and whoever did not want them alive. Mason's eyes narrowed. You mean the Kalarn? No, Herrick said, voice low. The Kalarn were scavengers. They were ordered to destroy them. Someone else gave the command. Mason's stomach dropped. Who? That, Herrick said, straightening, is the question the administrator wishes to discuss with you. An hour later, Mason stood in the colony command chamber, a round room filled with glowing displays and stern faces. Administrator Marlene Ardos, a tall woman with silver hair and calm eyes, sat behind the desk. She spoke in a quiet, measured tone that carried more weight than shouting ever could. Dr. Cole, you've served this colony for 5 years. Your record is clean, your evaluation's high. So tell me, why are you protecting unknown creatures that may pose a threat to every human here? Mason took a deep breath. Because they're alive. Because they were terrified. And because someone tried to burn them alive. Isn't that reason enough? Marlene studied him carefully. You're emotional, Doctor. That makes you dangerous. He stepped forward. No, that makes me human. The room fell silent. Finally, Marlene sighed. Lieutenant Herrick will continue investigating. Until we have answers, you're confined to your quarters. Mason wanted to argue, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She wasn't cruel. She was afraid. Later that night, Mason sat in his room, staring out at the dark desert through the window. His hand throbbed again, though the skin was perfectly healed. He heard a faint sound, a scratch, then a soft whimper. He froze. Slowly, he turned toward the vent near the floor. 2 glowing eyes blinked from the shadows. He knelt and whispered, Is that you? A tiny blue paw reached out, touching his fingers. Then another puppy crawled out. Then another. All 6, dusty and trembling, but alive. Mason laughed quietly, relief flooding through him. You clever little things. You found me. The puppies wagged their tails, chirping softly. One dropped something shiny at his feet, a piece of alien metal, marked with strange writing. Mason picked it up and frowned. It looked like a military insignia, not Kalarn, not human. Something else, he whispered. So you weren't just running from hunters. You're running from whoever made you. Outside, a storm was gathering over the desert, lightning flickering across the sky. And in the distance, far beyond the colony walls, a dark ship waited, its engines cold, its crew watching. They had come. Run before dawn, the storm hit the colony before sunrise. Winds screamed across the desert, carrying red dust that turned the sky into a blur. Lightning cracked above the domes, lighting up the outpost like a broken lantern. Inside his small room, Mason Cole stuffed a backpack with medkits, nutrient packs, and water filters. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from urgency. The 6 alien puppies watched silently from the corner, their glowing eyes following his every move. "We don't have much time," Mason whispered. "They'll search again at dawn. If they find you, you're done for." The puppies whined softly, sensing his tension. One of them climbed onto the bed and pressed its paw against his arm. A faint warmth spread from the touch, steadying, calm. Mason smiled faintly. "Thanks, kid. But we still have to move." He opened the ventilation grate, the same path they had used to find him the night before. The tunnels beneath the colony connected to the old mining district, abandoned, off the scanners, and open to the desert beyond. But before he could lift the first puppy inside, a voice spoke from behind him. "Going somewhere, Doctor?" Mason froze. Captain Rhea Valen stood in the doorway, her uniform covered in dust, one hand resting on her sidearm. Her eyes swept the room, stopping on the 6 glowing creatures. "I knew it," she said quietly. "You did hide them." Mason raised his hand slowly. "Rhea, please." "You don't understand. They're not dangerous." "Not dangerous?" She snapped. 3 raiders turned to ash last night." "What do you call that?" "They were defending themselves," Mason argued. "They didn't mean to kill anyone, they just reacted." Rhea sighed, her expression torn between duty and doubt. "You're making this worse, Mason. If I report this, they'll take the animals away. If I don't, I'll be court-martialed." Mason took a slow step forward. "You've seen things out here, Rhea. You know not everything dangerous is evil." She hesitated. The storm outside howled, shaking the window. Finally, she holstered her weapon. "You have 2 hours. After that, I'm filing my report. Whatever happens to you after that isn't on me." Mason blinked in surprise. "You're letting us go?" Rhea looked away. "I'm not blind. I saw the security feed. When those creatures glowed, it looked like they were protecting you. That's not what monsters do." He nodded, gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you." She turned toward the door. "Get out before I change my mind." Mason wasted no time. He slipped into the vents, 1 puppy at a time, crawling through the narrow tunnel that smelled of oil and rust. The metal vibrated under the storm's pressure, but the glowing fur of the puppies lit the way. After what felt like an hour, he reached the old mining sector. The tunnels opened into a vast cavern filled with broken machinery and half-buried cargo pods. It was silent, except for the soft hum of the puppy's breath. He found an old rover under a tarp and began repairing its power cell. As he worked, the puppies explored, sniffing, chirping, and chasing each other across the dusty floor. Despite everything, they still acted like children. When the engine finally roared to life, Mason smiled. "We're getting out of here!" But before he could climb in, a voice echoed through the cavern, low, distorted, and inhuman. "Leaving so soon, Dr. Cole?" Mason froze and turned. 3 figures stepped out from the shadows. They weren't Kalarn. Their armor was sleek, dark, and marked with the same strange insignia the puppies had carried. Their helmets hid their faces, but their movements were precise, almost mechanical. "You have something that belongs to us," the lead figure said. Mason's pulse raced. "They're living beings, not property." "They are prototypes," the figure replied. "Bioweapons created for containment warfare. You were never meant to see them." Mason felt his stomach twist. "Weapons? They're babies." "Their age is irrelevant. Their purpose is fixed." The figure raised a sleek black rifle. "Step aside, human." Mason shook his head. "You'll have to kill me first." For a moment, everything was silent except the sound of the storm echoing through the vents. Then, the lead soldier fired. Mason dove behind the rover as plasma bolts exploded against the wall. Sparks rained down. The puppies shrieked and scattered. "Stay down!" Mason shouted, grabbing a wrench and smashing a control panel. The overhead lights burst, plunging the cavern into darkness. The only illumination came from the soft, trembling glow of the puppies' bodies. The soldiers advanced, using their scanners to track movement. Then something unexpected happened. The puppies stopped running. They stood together in a small circle, eyes shining like tiny suns. The air shimmered around them. One by one, their light merged into a single glowing wave that rippled through the cavern. The attackers staggered as their armor systems flickered and died. The energy washed over Mason, but instead of pain, he felt warmth, clarity, like his thoughts were suddenly shared with the creatures. For a brief moment, he heard their voices in his mind. "Help us, please. We don't want to hurt anyone." Then the light burst outward. The three soldiers were thrown back, their armor smoking, their weapons shattered. Mason blinked through the haze, his ears ringing. When the light faded, the puppies had collapsed, their glow dimmed to faint flickers. He ran to them, heart pounding. Hey, stay with me!" They were breathing, but weak, drained. Whatever power they had used had nearly destroyed them. He lifted them into the rover, one by one, whispering, "I've got you. Just hang on." As the engine rumbled and the storm howled, Mason drove into the desert night. Behind him, the soldiers slowly rose from the dust, their suits sparking. The leader touched his helmet and spoke into the comm. "Target is mobile. Initiate planetary lockdown. The prototypes must not reach orbit. The prototypes must not reach orbit." The hidden lab beneath the sand, the desert stretched endlessly under a burning sky. Mason's rover rattled across the dunes, its engines coughing as sand hissed against the hull. The storm had faded, leaving behind eerie silence. The only sounds were the hum of the vehicle and the faint, uneven breathing of the 6 alien puppies lying on the passenger seat. Their glow had almost faded. The smallest one twitched weakly, letting out a low cry. Mason gritted his teeth and pressed harder on the throttle. "Hold on, little ones. We'll find help soon." He had no idea where soon was. The map on his console showed nothing but empty desert for hundreds of kilometers. But one blinking light caught his eye, an old research beacon, offline for years. It wasn't much, but it was the only lead he had. The rover rolled toward the signal until its fuel gauge hit red. The sun dipped low and the horizon bled orange and purple. Finally, Mason saw it. A half-buried structure made of old alloy, its roof cracked and half swallowed by sand. He parked beside it and climbed out, boots sinking into the dust. A faded sign lay half-broken near the entrance. Project Echo, Research Division, Restricted Access. Mason's heart skipped. The name rang faint bells. He had seen it once, buried in colony files. A secret human project shut down decades ago. He glanced at the puppies. "Guess we found your birthplace." The door opened after a few tries with his ID override. Inside, the air was stale but breathable. The walls were lined with old equipment, lab tables, data cores, and shattered glass tubes. Everything was covered in dust. He set the puppies down gently on a bench, then connected his datapad to one of the working terminals. The screen flickered to life, lines of corrupted text scrolling by. After a few minutes of searching, he found a file marked Echogenesis, Subject, Series 3B. He opened it. Objective: creation of adaptive biological guardians capable of instant tissue regeneration, emotional bonding with humans, and psionic defense output. Mason frowned. Guardians? The document continued. Subjects display accelerated empathy response to human caretakers. Neural imprinting forms within hours of contact. Initial results promising until the Kalarn uprising. Due to risk of misuse, all subjects ordered destroyed under Operation Firebreak. Mason leaned back, stunned. So they were designed to protect humans. It suddenly made sense. The puppies hadn't attacked anyone first. They had defended him instinctively. That was their purpose. He looked at them now, still lying weak and silent. "You were never weapons," he whispered. "You were meant to save lives." A faint beep pulled his attention. The smallest puppy's glow brightened for a moment and the console flickered again, displaying a holographic image. A woman's face appeared, projected from the old system. Her features were gentle but tired, her voice faint with static. "If you're seeing this, Project Echo has failed. The prototypes were never meant for war. Their power grows with emotional resonance, but fear turns that power unstable. The Council ordered their destruction, but I couldn't do it. I sent them away. Into hiding. If they've survived this long, protect them. They might be the key to restoring what humanity lost." The message ended abruptly. The screen went dark. Mason sat frozen. Whoever she was, she had risked everything to save these creatures. And now, decades later, the colony was trying to finish the job she had started to prevent. He reached out and gently stroked the nearest puppy's head. "You hear that? You were made to protect us, and now it's my turn to protect you." Suddenly, the lights in the facility flickered. The air filled with a deep hum. Mason turned sharply toward the door. Through the dusty window, distant shapes moved, dark vehicles approaching fast. The soldiers had found him. He rushed back to the console, searching for an escape route. The map displayed a maintenance tunnel leading deep underground, possibly an old launch corridor. He grabbed the nearest crate, placing the puppies carefully inside. "Sorry, kids. It's going to get bumpy again." Before leaving, he glanced one last time at the terminal. A new line of text had appeared, blinking faintly in red. "Containment breach detected. Primary system override activated." A low rumble echoed through the floor. Metal groaned somewhere below. Mason's eyes widened. "That's not good." He sprinted for the tunnel just as the roof shook. The old base began collapsing in on itself. Dust and debris fell like rain. Mason ducked through the corridor, clutching the crate close to his chest. Behind him, explosions ripped through the complex. A blinding light filled the main chamber as hidden reactors overloaded. He burst out into the open desert, diving behind a sand dune as a massive blast tore through the ground. The entire lab imploded, swallowed by the earth. The puppies whimpered, shaken but alive. Mason coughed through the dust cloud, looking back at the crater. "Project Echo," he muttered. "Wasn't meant to be found." He stood slowly, brushing sand from his jacket. In the distance, small lights flickered on the horizon. Search drones. He had maybe minutes before they reached him. He turned toward the northern ridge, where the desert gave way to old canyon paths. "All right, little ones," he said softly. "Time to run again." He started walking, the sun rising behind him, painting the dunes gold. The puppies followed close, their faint glow shimmering in the dawn light. They were tired, frightened and hunted, but together, they were still alive. And Mason knew one thing for certain. If humanity had once built these creatures to protect them, then maybe, just maybe, it was time for humanity to remember why. To remember why. Its crew watching. They had come for the puppies, and they weren't leaving without them. The awakening in the canyons. The wind howled through the canyon like a living thing. Mason stumbled across loose stone, his boots sliding as he carried the crate close to his chest. The alien puppies whimpered softly, their glow dimming again. Every breath burned his lungs, and every sound behind him made his heart race faster. Above, search drones moved like dark birds against the rising sun. Their engines hummed, scanning the rocky landscape below. Mason ducked under an arch of stone and crouched low. He pressed a hand to the nearest puppy's head. "Shh, it's okay. I've got you." A few seconds later, a sharp beam of light swept across the canyon wall, just meters away. He froze, barely breathing. The beam passed, and the drone drifted onward. He exhaled slowly. "We can't stay here." The map on his wrist display blinked weakly. There was one possible route ahead, a deep ravine that led toward the old mining tunnels. If he could make it there before the soldiers arrived, they might have a chance. He started moving again, his steps light and quiet. But as he climbed down the next ridge, one of the puppies let out a sharp cry, not of pain, but warning. Then he heard it. Engines. Close, Mason turned. A black hovercraft shot over the ridge behind him, followed by two more. Red lights flashed along their sides, and over the loudspeaker came a metallic voice. "Citizen Mason Kane, you are charged with harboring unauthorized biological assets. Surrender immediately." Mason tightened his grip on the crate. "Not today." He sprinted down the slope as plasma bolts slammed into the sand around him, throwing up fountains of dust. He dove behind a boulder, rolling to protect the puppies. "Hang on, little ones," he muttered. He reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a small EMP flare. "Let's even the odds." He threw it high into the air. It burst with a sharp crack and a blinding blue light. The nearest drone flickered and spiraled out of control, crashing into the rocks. But the victory was short-lived. The others were still coming. Mason turned to run again, but suddenly the air shimmered around him, and he froze. The puppies were glowing again, brighter than before. The smallest one looked up at him, its eyes wide and shining like molten gold. Then, for the first time, Mason heard a voice, not through his ears but inside his head. Danger! Help! Protect! He stumbled backward. What the? The puppy's glow spread outward, forming a faint sphere of light around them. Plasma shots hit the field and fizzled harmlessly. The air vibrated with strange energy, and Mason felt a deep hum in his bones. The soldiers shouted orders. Contain the subject! Do not hit the prototypes! But it was too late. The canyon exploded with light as the puppy's shield expanded. Rocks shattered, and sand whipped into a blinding storm. Mason threw his arm over his face. When the light faded, the soldiers' vehicles were scattered, some overturned. The drones were nothing but smoking wreckage. Mason lowered his arm slowly. The puppies were sitting calmly in the sand, still glowing faintly, tails wagging. He stared in disbelief. You did that? The smallest one tilted its head as if to say yes. Then, once more, the voice echoed faintly in his mind. Protect. Human? Friend? He laughed, breathless and shaken. You've got to be kidding me. But there was no time to rest. The communications chatter from the soldiers' radios was still active. Reinforcements were coming. Dozens more. Mason wiped the sweat from his brow. All right, team, he said softly. Looks like you really are Guardians. But if we're going to survive this, we need to move. They traveled deeper into the canyon system until they reached an old mining entrance, its gates half buried under rock. Mason pried it open with effort, coughing on the stale air inside. He switched on his headlamp. Rusted tracks ran into darkness. Old machinery hung from the ceiling like skeletons. But at least it was shelter. He set the crate down and sat against the wall, breathing hard. The puppies curled around him, their small bodies warm. For a few quiet minutes, there was only peace. Then softly, Mason began to speak. You know, I used to think I was done helping anyone. Spent too long fixing what other people broke. But you... He smiled faintly. You make it feel worth it again. The smallest puppy blinked, then climbed into his lap, curling up against his chest. Mason chuckled quietly. Yeah, guess we're stuck with each other. Hours later, a faint vibration shook the ground. Mason looked up sharply. The walls trembled as a massive rumble echoed through the tunnels. He hurried to the entrance. Outside, far on the horizon, he saw flashes of blue fire. The soldiers were carpet-bombing the area they had just left. He watched in silence, jaw tight. Guess they're serious about wiping you out, he murmured. Behind him, the puppies whimpered. Mason turned and crouched beside them. Don't worry. We're not going to let that happen. Then he noticed something. A symbol etched into the mining wall. It matched the one from the Project Echo facility. Beneath it, a faded message read, Authorized Shelter Access, Biogen Sector, 12-kilometer underground. Mason's eyes widened. Another lab, maybe one that's still working. He slung his pack over his shoulder and looked down at the glowing puppies. All right, little ones. Looks like our road goes deeper. He switched on his lamp again and started down the dark tunnel, his footsteps echoing softly against the stone. The puppies followed close, their glow lighting the path like tiny stars, and as the darkness swallowed them, Mason couldn't shake one thought from his mind. If these creatures were made to protect humans, what happens when they decide humanity isn't worth protecting? The last Guardian, the tunnel seemed endless. Mason's footsteps echoed softly, each one bouncing off the metal walls. The puppies padded behind him in silence, their soft glow pushing back the darkness. The deeper they went, the warmer the air became. Old lights flickered to life along the ceiling as if recognizing them. Somewhere far below, machinery hummed, alive, waiting. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. Giant support pillars reached up into darkness, and in the center stood a huge glass cylinder filled with faint blue liquid. Inside floated a figure, not quite human, not quite alien. Mason froze.
What in the world?
A voice echoed through hidden speakers, calm and mechanical. Welcome, human. You have arrived at Biogen Sector. He swallowed hard.
Who's speaking?
I am Echo Prime, the final caretaker of Project Echo. The puppies whined softly, gathering around his feet. Mason looked up at the cylinder.
You were the ones who made them, weren't you?
Correct. Series 3B, created from human and off-world genetic synthesis, designed to defend and heal. Humanity's final defense after the colony wars. Mason frowned.
Then why did the government try to kill them?
Because humanity forgot what it meant to protect. They saw power, not purpose. The blue light inside the chamber pulsed brighter. You, Mason Kane, have shown the one quality they were meant to answer to. Compassion. Mason stepped closer.
What do you want from me?
Not from you. For them. The puppies walked forward, ears perked. Their glow merged into one bright field of light. Symbols flickered on the walls, old systems activating. Their bond with you has completed the sequence. They are no longer prototypes. They are guardians! Mason's eyes widened as energy rippled through the floor. The puppies' bodies shimmered, growing slightly larger, stronger. Their fur gleamed like silver fire. Each one looked up at him, no longer helpless but aware. They will protect life as they were made to. But they require choice. Will you guide them or release them? He looked at the glowing eyes surrounding him. For a moment, he saw everything they'd been through: fear, pain, loyalty, and hope. He knelt down and whispered, "You don't need a master. You just need a friend." The smallest one stepped forward and placed a paw on his hand. A warm pulse spread through his chest, and the voice echoed once more. Softer now, almost human. Then humanity may still have a future. The ground shook suddenly. An alarm blared. "Warning! Hostile forces entering perimeter." Mason spun toward the tunnel entrance. Distant lights flickered. The soldiers had found them again. He looked back at the puppies. "Time to prove what you were made for." They barked, a sharp, resonant sound that filled the chamber with energy. The first wave of soldiers stormed in, shouting. Plasma bolts fired, but before they could hit, the air around Mason shimmered. The puppies moved in perfect unison, forming a shield of glowing energy that deflected every blast. Then, as one, they leapt. Blinding arcs of light cut through the darkness. Weapons overloaded. Drones crashed to the floor in smoking pieces. Mason grabbed a fallen rifle and covered their flank. He fired short bursts, driving the soldiers back. "Go, get out!" he shouted, but instead of running, the puppies circled around him protectively. Their eyes burned bright gold, their power building like a storm. Protect human. Protect life. The entire cavern erupted in light. When the brightness faded, the soldiers were gone, scattered, disarmed, alive but unconscious. Not one was dead. Mason stood at the center, breathing hard. The puppies stood around him, tails wagging. He dropped his weapon and laughed weakly. You held back. You didn't kill them?" The smallest one looked up. "Guardians, not destroyers." Mason knelt, running a hand through its fur. "You got that right." Later, after the dust settled, he climbed to the surface again. The night sky stretched wide above him, filled with stars. Quiet and endless, the puppies followed him, their soft glow lighting the dunes like fallen moons. He gazed toward the horizon where the colony lights burned faintly. Somewhere out there, humanity still fought and argued, still feared what it didn't understand. But maybe that could change. He looked down at his small, glowing companions and smiled. "Let's go home." The wind swept across the sand, carrying his voice into the stars. Epilogue. Weeks later, a transmission spread quietly across the colonies, a message with no name attached. "They were born to protect us. We tried to destroy them, but one human remembered what we had forgotten. Compassion is not weakness. It is the strength that built our worlds." The message ended with a single image, a human kneeling in the sand, surrounded by 6 glowing creatures, eyes bright, tails wagging, standing guard beside him. Across the stars, countless people saw it, and for the first time in years, many of them believed again. not in weapons or power, but in the strange, stubborn heart of humanity. Because sometimes all it takes to change the galaxy is one human who refuses to walk away. One human who refuses to walk away.